How did the seemingly invincible Hitler lose World War II? The year was 1933. A man named Adolf Hitler, leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, stepped into the role of German Chancellor. His charisma was infectious, his speeches were compelling, and his promises of a brighter future for Germany were alluring. It didn't take long for Hitler to consolidate power, transforming Germany into a totalitarian state. Hitler's rise to power was no accident, but rather a well-orchestrated series of events fueled by a potent propaganda machine. Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Propaganda, played a pivotal role in shaping public opinion. They painted an image of Hitler as Germany's savior, a man destined to restore the nation's dignity and prosperity following the humiliation of the Treaty of Versailles. This era saw the birth of a new kind of warfare. Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, was Hitler's military strategy of choice. Through fast, concentrated attacks, the German forces aimed to shock and disorient enemy lines, leading to swift victories. The strategy was devastatingly effective, leading to the early conquests of Poland, Denmark, Norway, and France. As the German war machine rolled across Europe, Hitler's power seemed to grow exponentially. But behind the scenes, Hitler was not only a charismatic leader, but also a ruthless dictator. He ruled with an iron fist, suppressing dissent, implementing policies of racial purity, and fostering a culture of fear. His vision of a thousand-year Reich was built on the principles of racial superiority and territorial expansion, principles that would ultimately lead to the horrors of the Holocaust. Hitler's early successes in World War II were undeniable. His armies seemed unstoppable, his strategies were revolutionary, and his grip on the German people was ironclad. From an outside perspective, Hitler appeared invincible, a force of nature that was reshaping the world order. Hitler seemed unstoppable, but as we will see, even the mighty can fall. Could Hitler's own overconfidence have been his downfall? It's an intriguing question, isn't it? Hitler, at the height of his power, seemed invincible. His armies were sweeping across Europe, conquering countries with a speed and ferocity that left the world stunned. But even the mightiest can stumble, and for Hitler, his overconfidence was a significant misstep. One of the most glaring examples of Hitler's overconfidence was his decision to invade the Soviet Union. Hitler believed that his blitzkrieg strategy, which had been so effective in Western Europe, would also bring the Soviet Union to its knees. But he underestimated the sheer size and resilience of the Soviet Union, not to mention the harshness of the Russian winter. By stretching his forces too thin and not preparing adequately for the winter, Hitler set his armies up for a disastrous defeat. The Eastern Front turned into a quagmire that drained Germany's resources and manpower at an alarming rate. Then there was Hitler's decision to declare war on the United States after the attack on Pearl Harbor. This move, perhaps more than any other, revealed the depth of Hitler's overconfidence. Despite being already engaged in a brutal war on multiple fronts, Hitler believed that he could also take on the industrial and military might of the United States. This overreach opened up yet another front, stretching Germany's resources even thinner and intensifying the strain on the German war machine. In both these strategic decisions, Hitler's overconfidence clouded his judgment. He dismissed the challenges and dismissed the potential consequences, believing that his forces were invincible. But in doing so, he set the stage for his own downfall. His overconfidence led to strategic blunders that, in the end, were too costly to overcome. Even the most powerful leaders can be brought down by their own hubris. And for Hitler, his overconfidence led him to make decisions that weakened his position and ultimately contributed to his defeat. As we delve deeper into the events of World War II, we'll see how these strategic errors played out and how they helped to turn the tide of the war. Hitler's overconfidence led to strategic blunders that would cost him dearly. But was it all Hitler's mistakes, or did the Allies play their part too? As we dive deeper into the labyrinth of World War II, we uncover the extraordinary resilience of the Allies, a factor that significantly contributed to Hitler's eventual downfall. Let's take a closer look at the pivotal roles played by Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States. Firstly, Britain's defiance under the indomitable leadership of Winston Churchill was nothing short of remarkable. Despite the Blitz, a relentless bombing campaign by the Luftwaffe, Britain stood its ground. Churchill, with his rousing speeches, inspired a nation to hold firm. "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender," he declared, and so they did. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union was waging its own war of resistance. Though they suffered heavy losses at the hands of the German war machine, their resolve remained unbroken. The Soviets fought bitterly, employing a scorched earth policy to deny the Germans resources. This tenacity, coupled with the harsh Russian winter, stalled the German advance, buying the Allies some much-needed time. Across the Atlantic, the industrial strength of the United States played a pivotal role in the Allies' resilience. The US, though initially reluctant to enter the war, eventually became the arsenal of democracy. From aircraft to tanks, from ammunition to rations, the American industrial complex churned out vital supplies that kept the Allies going. President Roosevelt's Lend-Lease Act, which allowed the US to supply military aid to any country whose defense was considered vital to America's security, further bolstered the Allies' efforts. In retrospect, it becomes clear that Hitler's defeat was not just a result of his own strategic blunders. The Allies, powered by unity, determination, and strategic brilliance, played a significant role in turning the tide of the war. The Allies showed a resilience that Hitler had not accounted for. The Battle of Stalingrad, a turning point of World War II? As we delve into the icy depths of the Russian winter of 1942, we find ourselves entrenched in what is perhaps one of the most brutal and decisive battles of the Second World War, the Battle of Stalingrad. Adolf Hitler, riding high on his wave of conquests, sought to seize this industrial city, not just for its strategic significance, but also to deal a psychological blow to Joseph Stalin by capturing the city that bore his name. However, the German forces were ill-prepared for the harsh Russian winter and the fierce Soviet resistance. The city transformed into a deadly battleground, with every street, every building becoming a site of relentless, close-quarters combat. The Red Army, fueled by a potent mix of desperation and determination, defended their homeland with a ferocious tenacity that caught the Germans off guard. The Soviets launched Operation Uranus, a masterstroke that encircled and cut off the German Sixth Army. The German forces, now trapped and starved, were left with no option but to surrender. This marked the first major defeat of Hitler's forces and shattered the myth of the invincibility of the German army. The Battle of Stalingrad was more than just a military defeat for Hitler. It was a crippling blow to the morale of the German forces and a stark revelation of the strategic blunders committed by the Führer. It also marked a significant shift in momentum in favor of the Allies. The relentless Soviet resistance, coupled with the severe Russian winter, proved to be too much for Hitler's forces. The Battle of Stalingrad served as a stark reminder of the fatal consequences of overreaching ambition and underestimating one's enemy. Ultimately, it was a battle that showcased the sheer willpower of the Soviet forces, the devastating cost of warfare, and the turning tides of a global conflict. Indeed, the Battle of Stalingrad was a crushing blow to Hitler's ambitions. In the end, how did the once mighty Hitler meet his downfall? As the tide of the war began to turn, the Allies, with their renewed vigor, planned an audacious assault known as the D-Day invasion. On June 6, 1944, a massive Allied force, the largest amphibious invasion in history, stormed the beaches of Normandy in France. This marked the beginning of the end for Hitler's Germany, as the Allies gradually reclaimed Western Europe. Yet, Hitler refused to accept defeat. He continued to deploy his forces, clinging onto the hope of victory. But his once formidable army was now a shadow of its former self. The Allies, on the other hand, were gaining momentum, moving steadily towards the heart of Hitler's empire, Berlin. By April 1945, the Allies were at the doorstep of Berlin, the capital of the Third Reich. The city was besieged, its people terrified, and its leader, Hitler, was holed up in a bunker. With nowhere left to run and no hope for victory, Hitler chose to end his life. On the 30th of April, Hitler committed suicide, leaving behind a nation in ruins and a world in shock. Within a week of Hitler's death, Germany surrendered unconditionally on May 7, 1945, marking the end of World War II in Europe. The once feared dictator was gone. His dream of a 1,000-year Reich lay in ruins, and his reign of terror had finally come to an end. In the aftermath of Hitler's defeat, Europe began the slow and painful process of recovery. Nations were rebuilt, borders were redrawn, and people tried to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. The world had witnessed the darkest chapter of human history, and it was a chapter that should never be repeated. Hitler's reign of terror came to an end, but the world would never forget the horrors of World War II.